Welcome to the Story Lab. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's begin. The message on my phone screen glowed ominously. Urgently meet me. It was from Ethan Rhodes, my old college buddy turned detective. We hadn't spoken in months, so this out-of-the-blue text set alarm bells ringing in my head. I glanced at my Rolex, a gift from Vanessa on our 10th anniversary. 2:30 p.m. I had a board meeting in an hour, but something in Ethan's message told me this couldn't wait. Callie, I called out to my assistant. She appeared in the doorway of my office, tablet in hand. I need to step out for a bit. Can you reschedule the board meeting? Callie nodded, her brow furrowing slightly. Of course, Mr. Carter. Is everything all right? I forced a smile. Just a quick errand. I'll be back soon. As I rode the elevator down from my penthouse office, my mind raced. What could be so urgent? Had something happened to Ethan? Or worse, to my family? I found Ethan waiting for me in a quiet corner of Millennium Park. His face was grim, his posture tense. As I approached, he stood up, glancing around nervously. "Lucas," he said, his voice low. "Thanks for coming so quickly." "What's going on, Ethan? You're scaring me." He took a deep breath. "There's no easy way to say this, so I'll just come out with it. Your wife and business partner have put out a hit on you." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "What? Vanessa and Adrian? That's impossible. You must be mistaken." Ethan shook his head. "I wish I was. I've been working undercover, posing as a hitman on the dark web. 2 days ago, I received a contract. The targets were you and your company." My legs felt weak. I sank onto the bench, my mind reeling. "How can you be sure it's them?" "I've been communicating with them through encrypted channels. They've provided detailed information about your routines, your security measures, even the layout of your house. Information only insiders would know." I felt like I was going to be sick. Why? Why would they do this? Ethan sat down next to me, his voice softening. "From what I've gathered, it's a combination of factors. Vanessa stands to inherit your fortune if you die. Adrian seems to think he can take control of the company in the chaos that would follow your death. Plus, he hesitated. They're having an affair." The last revelation hit me like a physical blow. I'd trusted Vanessa with my life, my love, my children. And Adrian? We'd built the company together from the ground up. How could they betray me like this? "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan leaned in closer. "We gather evidence. We can't go to the police yet. Your wife and Adrian are too well connected. We need irrefutable proof." I nodded, a cold determination settling over me. "What's the plan?" "For now, act normal. Don't let on that you know anything. I'll continue communicating with them as the hitman. We'll set up a sting operation to catch them red-handed." "And in the meantime?" I asked. "In the meantime, we need someone to gather concrete evidence of their affair and any illegal activities they might be involved in. I have a contact, a private investigator named Laura Green. She's the best in the business." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Okay, set it up. I want to meet her as soon as possible." Ethan nodded, standing up. "I'll arrange it." "Lucas," he put a hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry you're going through this, but we'll get them. I promise." As I watched Ethan walk away, the full weight of the situation crashed down on me. My wife wanted me dead. My business partner wanted to steal my company. My entire life was built on a foundation of lies. But as the shock began to wear off, another emotion took its place: anger. They thought they could destroy me? They had no idea who they were dealing with. I was Lucas Carter, and I didn't go down without a fight. I pulled out my phone and dialed Callie's number. "Clear my schedule for the rest of the day," I said when she answered. "And get me everything you can on Adrian's recent activities in the company. Financial reports, meeting minutes, everything." "Mr. Carter? Is something wrong?" I paused, considering how much to tell her. Callie had been with me since the beginning. If there was anyone I could trust, it was her. "Callie, I need you to listen carefully. What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this conversation. Understand?" "Of course, Mr. Carter. You can trust me." "I know I can," I said, and began to explain the situation. As I walked back to the office, my mind was already formulating a plan. Vanessa and Adrian thought they had me cornered. But they were about to learn that in this game of deception, I was the master player. The next morning, I found myself in a nondescript office building on the outskirts of Chicago. The placard on the door read, "Green Investigations." I knocked, and a voice called out, "Come in." Laura Green was nothing like I'd expected. Instead of the grizzled ex-cop I'd imagined, I was greeted by a sharp-eyed woman in her early 40s, her red hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail. "Mr. Carter," she said, extending her hand. "Ethan filled me in on the basics. Why don't you tell me your side of the story?" I sat down across from her desk, running a hand through my hair. "Honestly, Ms. Green, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it myself. My wife and my business partner, they've betrayed me in the worst possible way." Laura nodded, her expression neutral. "I understand this is difficult, Mr. Carter, but I need you to be as detailed as possible. What exactly do you want me to find?" I leaned forward, my voice low and intense. "I need concrete evidence of their affair. And more importantly, I need proof of any illegal activities they might be involved in. Embezzlement, fraud, anything that could explain why they suddenly want me out of the picture." "All right," Laura said, pulling out a notepad. "Let's start with the basics. Tell me about your wife. Any changes in her behavior recently?" I thought back over the past few months. Now that you mention it, she's been more distant lately. Working late, taking mysterious phone calls. I chalked it up to stress, but now? Laura jotted down some notes. "And your business partner, Adrian? Any suspicious activity at the company?" I shook my head. Nothing obvious. But then again, I trusted him completely. If he was up to something, I might not have noticed. "That's where I come in," Laura said with a grim smile. "I'll need access to your home and office. Security codes, schedules, the works." I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Whatever you need. Just be discreet. If they suspect anything, who knows what they might do." Laura's eyes met mine, her gaze steady and reassuring. "Mr. Carter, discretion is my middle name. They won't know I exist until it's too late." As I left Laura's office, I felt a mix of emotions. Relief that someone was on the case, fear of what she might uncover, and a burning anger that simmered just below the surface. Back at my office, I found Callie waiting for me, a stack of files on her desk. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice low, "I've got the information you asked for." I ushered her into my office, closing the door behind us. "What did you find?" Callie spread the files out on my desk. "Nothing concrete yet, but there are some discrepancies in the financial reports. Small amounts missing here and there. Nothing that would raise red flags on its own, but when you add it all up..." I leaned over the papers, my eyes scanning the numbers. "It's substantial. Clever. He's been siphoning off funds right under our noses." "There's more," Callie said, pulling out another file. "Adrian's been having a lot of closed-door meetings lately. Meetings that aren't on the official calendar." I looked up at her, a newfound appreciation in my eyes. "Callie, you're a godsend. Keep digging. Anything you can find, no matter how small, could be crucial." She nodded, her expression determined. "You can count on me, Mr. Carter. We'll get to the bottom of this." As Callie left my office, I sank into my chair, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. I pulled out my phone, staring at the home screen. A picture of Vanessa and me on our last vacation, smiling and carefree. How could it all have gone so wrong? My phone buzzed with a text from Laura. "Found something. Meeting tonight, 8 p.m., usual place." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever was to come. The game was on, and I was playing for keeps. That evening, I pulled into the driveway of our suburban home, my stomach in knots. How was I supposed to face Vanessa, knowing what I knew? How could I look into her eyes and not see the betrayal? As I stepped through the front door, I was greeted by the sound of laughter. My children, Emma and Jake, were chasing each other through the living room, their faces lit up with joy. "Daddy!" Emma cried, launching herself into my arms. I caught her, holding her tight, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Hey, princess," I said, forcing a smile. "Have you been good for Mom today?" Jake came running up, his action figure clutched in his hand. "Dad, look. I built a fortress for Captain America." I ruffled his hair, my heart aching. How could Vanessa even think of tearing our family apart? That's awesome, buddy. Why don't you show me after dinner? Vanessa appeared in the doorway to the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Welcome home, honey. Dinner's almost ready. I looked at her, searching for any sign of guilt, any hint of the monster lurking beneath the surface. But all I saw was my wife, the woman I'd loved for over a decade. Thanks, I managed to say. I'll just go wash up. As I headed upstairs, I heard Vanessa call out to the kids. Emma, Jake, go set the table, please. Dinner was a surreal experience. We sat around the table, passing dishes, talking about our days as if everything was normal, as if my wife wasn't plotting my murder. So, how was work today? Vanessa asked, spooning some mashed potatoes onto Jake's plate. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to meet her eyes. Oh, the usual. Meetings, phone calls. Nothing exciting. She nodded, seemingly satisfied with my answer. Adrian called earlier. He said something about a big client meeting tomorrow? The mention of Adrian's name sent a jolt through me. I gripped my fork tighter, willing myself to stay calm. Oh? What did he say exactly? Vanessa shrugged. Not much. Just that it was important, and he needed you there. I nodded, my mind racing. Was this part of their plan? Some sort of trap? Thanks for letting me know. I'll give him a call later. The rest of the meal passed in a blur. I barely tasted the food, my attention split between maintaining a facade of normalcy for the kids and analyzing every word and gesture from Vanessa. After dinner, as promised, I let Jake show me his Captain America fortress. I sat on the floor of his room, watching him act out elaborate battle scenes, my heart breaking. How could I protect them from what was coming? Later, as I tucked Emma into bed, she looked up at me with her big brown eyes. Daddy, are you okay? You look sad. I forced a smile, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a little tired from work. She reached up, wrapping her small arms around my neck. I love you, Daddy. I held her close, fighting back tears. I love you too, Princess. More than you'll ever know. As I closed her bedroom door, I found Vanessa waiting in the hallway. The kids are right, she said softly. You do seem off. Is everything okay? For a moment, I was tempted to confront her right there, to demand answers, to ask how she could do this to us. But Ethan's warning echoed in my mind. We needed evidence first. Just stressed about work, I lied. This new client, it's a big deal. I'm worried about messing it up. Vanessa stepped closer, placing a hand on my arm. The touch that used to bring me comfort now made my skin crawl. You'll do great, she said. You always do. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. As we got ready for bed, going through our nightly routines as if nothing had changed, I felt like I was suffocating. How long could I keep up this charade? As Vanessa drifted off to sleep beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My phone buzzed softly on the nightstand. A text from Laura, meeting confirmed. Photographic evidence obtained. We need to talk. I closed my eyes, a mix of dread and determination washing over me. Tomorrow, I'd see the proof of my wife's betrayal with my own eyes. Tomorrow, the gloves would come off. The next evening, I found myself in Ethan's modest apartment on the outskirts of the city. Laura was already there when I arrived, a folder tucked under her arm. Ethan ushered me in quickly, his eyes darting to the street behind me before he closed the door. All right, Ethan said, gesturing for us to sit around his kitchen table. Let's hear what you've found, Laura. Laura opened her folder, spreading out a series of photographs. My stomach lurched as I recognized the figures in the images. Vanessa and Adrian, locked in an intimate embrace outside a nondescript motel. Vanessa, slipping an envelope to a man I didn't recognize in a dimly lit parking garage. Adrian, shaking hands with known criminals outside an exclusive nightclub. As you can see, Laura said, her voice clinical and detached, the affair is definitely happening. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. I picked up one of the photos, my hands shaking slightly. What do you mean? Laura pointed to the image of Vanessa with the unknown man. This guy? He's a known fence for stolen goods. And these men with Adrian? They're connected to a money laundering operation we've been trying to bust for years. Ethan leaned forward, his brow furrowed. So it's not just murder they're planning. They're involved in some serious criminal activities. I sat back, my mind reeling. But why? We have a successful, legitimate business. Why risk everything like this? Greed, Laura said simply. From what I've been able to piece together, they've been embezzling funds from your company for months. But they got in over their heads. They owe money to some very dangerous people. And they think killing me will solve their problems? I asked, incredulous. Ethan nodded grimly. With you out of the picture, Vanessa inherits everything. Adrian takes control of the company. They can cover their tracks and pay off their debts. I stood up abruptly, pacing the small kitchen. We need to go to the police. With this evidence. It's not enough, Laura cut in. Not yet. We need to catch them in the act. That's where Ethan comes in. Ethan leaned forward, his voice low and intense. Here's the plan. I'll tell them I'm ready to make the hit. We'll stage your death, send them photographic proof. Then we'll arrange a meeting for the payment. And that's when we confront them, I finished, the pieces falling into place. Laura nodded. Exactly. We'll have everything on tape. Their reaction to your death, their confession when they think they're in the clear, and their shock when you confront them. I leaned back in my chair, absorbing the plan. It's risky, but it might be our best shot. When do we do this? Ethan checked his phone. I've been communicating with them. They're getting impatient. We should move fast. How about tomorrow night? My heart raced at the thought. Tomorrow? That's soon. The sooner, the better, Laura interjected. The longer we wait, the more chance they have to change their minds or get spooked. I nodded, steeling myself. You're right. Let's do it. What do you need from me? Ethan stood up, pacing the small kitchen. We need to make the death scene convincing. I've got some theatrical makeup that'll make you look, well, dead. And I'll be there to take the photos, Laura added. We'll need to find a suitable location. Somewhere isolated, but not too far from the city. I thought for a moment. There's an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. My company used to use it for storage. It would be perfect. Ethan clapped his hands together. Great. We'll meet there at sundown. Lucas, you'll need to clear your schedule. Make sure Vanessa doesn't suspect anything. What about after? I asked. Once they've seen the photo, what then? Laura pulled out a small device from her bag. This is a high-tech recording device. We'll plant it in the penthouse where you'll confront them. It'll capture everything. I took the device, turning it over in my hands. And this will be enough? To put them away? Combined with the evidence we already have? Laura nodded. It'll be more than enough. We spent the next hour going over the details of the plan. By the time I left Ethan's apartment, my head was spinning, but a grim determination had settled over me. As I drove home, I rehearsed what I'd say to Vanessa, how I'd act normal, knowing what was to come. It felt surreal, like I was preparing for a role in some twisted play. I pulled into our driveway, taking a deep breath before stepping out of the car. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, I'd reclaim my life from those who sought to destroy it. I walked into the house, ready to give the performance of a lifetime. Honey, I'm home, I called out, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. The final act was about to begin. The abandoned warehouse loomed before me, a hulking silhouette against the setting sun. My heart pounded as I pulled into the empty lot, gravel crunching under my tires. Ethan's car was already there. He stepped out as I approached, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Ready for this? He asked, his voice low. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. We walked into the warehouse together, our footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. Laura emerged from the shadows, camera in hand. Let's get you set up, she said briskly. Ethan unzipped his bag, pulling out an assortment of makeup and props. Lie down here, he instructed, pointing to a cleared space on the concrete floor. As I positioned myself, Ethan began applying the makeup. This might feel a bit cold, he warned, dabbing a pale substance on my face. How's it looking? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Laura peered at me critically. Disturbingly realistic. Ethan, you missed your calling as a makeup artist. Ethan chuckled darkly. Not exactly a career path I'd considered. As they worked, I closed my eyes, trying to calm my racing thoughts. What if this doesn't work? I mumbled. It will, Laura said firmly. We've got this, Lucas. Trust the plan. Finally, Ethan stepped back. All right, I think we're ready. Laura, how's the lighting? Laura moved around, adjusting her camera. Perfect. The shadows will add to the effect. Lucas, try to look, well, dead. I let my body go limp, my eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. The click of Laura's camera seemed deafening in the quiet warehouse. Got it, she said after a moment. This should do the trick. Ethan helped me up, handing me a mirror. I stared at my reflection, barely recognizing myself. Pale skin, sunken eyes, a hint of blue around my lips. It was chillingly convincing. Now comes the hard part, Ethan said, pulling out his phone. I'm sending the message now. Work done. With the photo attached. We huddled around the phone, waiting. The minutes stretched on, feeling like hours. Finally, a response. Ethan read it aloud. Excellent work. Payment as agreed. Meet tomorrow, 9 p.m., at the Skyline Penthouse. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. They bought it. Laura nodded, her expression grim. Now we prepare for tomorrow. The real showdown. As we cleaned up, removing all traces of our presence, a steely resolve settled over me. Tomorrow, I'd face my betrayers. Tomorrow, I'd take back my life. The next evening found me pacing the luxurious penthouse suite, my nerves on edge. Laura sat at the desk, fiddling with her recording equipment. Relax, Lucas, she said, not looking up. Everything's in place. We've got this. I ran a hand through my hair. Easy for you to say. You're not about to confront your murderous wife and backstabbing business partner. Laura's eyes softened. I know this is hard, but remember why we're doing this. They tried to have you killed. They don't deserve your sympathy. I nodded, taking a deep breath. You're right. I'm ready. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. They're on their way up. Good luck. I positioned myself in the shadows of the bedroom, out of sight of the main living area. Laura gave me a thumbs up and slipped into the walk-in closet, leaving the door slightly ajar. Minutes later, I heard the click of the door opening, followed by familiar voices. Are you sure this is the right place? Vanessa's voice, tinged with nervousness. This is the address he gave us, Adrian replied. Just relax. It'll all be over soon. My fists clenched at the casual way they discussed my supposed death. I forced myself to stay put, waiting for the right moment. Hello? Adrian called out. We're here for the meeting. I heard footsteps, then the sound of someone sitting on the couch. Nice place, Vanessa commented. Very discreet. Perfect for conducting our kind of business, Adrian agreed. I'd heard enough. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the bedroom. And what kind of business would that be exactly? The looks on their faces were almost comical. Vanessa's jaw dropped, her face draining of color. Adrian leapt to his feet, knocking over a vase in the process. Lucas? Vanessa stammered. But how? I stepped closer, my voice cold. Surprised to see me? I bet you are. Considering you paid to have me killed. Adrian recovered first, his shock morphing into anger. What is this? Some kind of trick? No trick, I said, my eyes boring into his. Just justice catching up with you both. Vanessa stood up, her hands shaking. Lucas, I can explain. Save it. I cut her off. I know everything. The affair, the embezzlement, the hit. Did you really think you'd get away with it? Adrian's eyes darted around the room, likely looking for an escape route. You can't prove anything? I smiled coldly. Can't I? Laura, care to join us? Laura stepped out of the closet, holding up her recording device. Got it all on tape, boss. Their reaction to seeing you alive, their implicit admission of guilt. It's all here. Vanessa collapsed back onto the couch, her head in her hands. Oh God, oh God. Adrian, ever the businessman, tried to negotiate. Lucas, let's talk about this. We can work something out. I laughed humorlessly. Work something out? You try to have me killed, Adrian. There's no working out from that. Just then, the door burst open. Ethan strode in, flanked by two uniformed officers. Vanessa Carter, Adrian Morgan, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and embezzlement. As the officers read them their rights, cuffing their hands behind their backs, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. This was the end of a chapter in my life, but also the beginning of a new one. Vanessa looked at me one last time as they let her out. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. As the door closed behind them, Laura placed a hand on my shoulder. "You did it, Lucas. It's over." I nodded, suddenly feeling exhausted. "Yeah, it's over. But the fallout, that's just beginning." The penthouse fell into an eerie silence after Vanessa and Adrian were led away. I sank onto the couch, the adrenaline draining from my body. Ethan returned a few minutes later, his face grim but satisfied. "They're on their way to the station. We'll need you to come down later to give a formal statement." I nodded numbly. "What happens now?" Laura, who had been packing up her equipment, joined us. "Now, we build the case. With the recorded confession and the evidence we've gathered, it should be pretty straightforward." Ethan sat down across from me. "Lucas, I need to ask, are you sure you want to go through with pressing charges? It's not too late to." "No," I cut him off, my voice firm. "They made their choice. They were willing to destroy me, our family, everything we built. They need to face the consequences." Laura nodded approvingly. "Good. They don't deserve your mercy, Lucas." A knock at the door interrupted us. Ethan answered it, speaking briefly with someone outside before turning back to us. "The forensics team is here. They need to process the scene." As we made way for the team, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unreality. Just yesterday, my life had seemed perfect. Now, it was in shambles. "I should get home," I said suddenly. "The kids, they'll be wondering where we are." Ethan's expression softened. "Do you want me to come with you? To help explain?" I shook my head. "No, this is something I need to do myself. But thanks, Ethan, for everything." He clasped my shoulder. "That's what friends are for. Call me if you need anything, day or night." As I drove home, my mind raced. How would I explain this to Emma and Jake? How could I possibly make them understand that their mother had betrayed us all? I pulled into the driveway, steeling myself for the conversation to come. The babysitter, a college student from down the street, met me at the door. "Mr. Carter, is everything okay?" Mrs. Carter never came home, and I couldn't reach her. I forced a smile. "Everything's fine, Sarah. There was just a work emergency. I'm sorry we didn't call. How are the kids?" "They're asleep," she said, looking relieved. "They were asking for you both earlier, but I managed to distract them with movies and ice cream." I thanked her and sent her home, then made my way upstairs. I peeked into the kids' rooms, watching them sleep peacefully, unaware of how their world had just been turned upside down. My phone buzzed with a text from Callie. "Just heard the news. Are you okay? What do you need me to do?" I typed back, "I'm managing. Can you clear my schedule for the next few days? And we'll need to call an emergency board meeting." Her response was immediate. "Consider it done. I'm here if you need anything. Anything at all." I smiled, grateful for her loyalty. At least some things in my life remained solid. As I settled into bed, alone for the first time in years, the full weight of the day's events crashed over me. Tears I'd been holding back finally fell, a mix of grief, anger, and relief. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Explaining to the kids, facing the board, dealing with the legal aftermath. But for now, in the quiet of the night, I allowed myself to mourn the life I thought I had, and to hope for the life that lay ahead. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone ringing incessantly. Groggily, I reached for it, seeing Callie's name on the screen. "Lucas," she said as soon as I answered, her voice tense. "I'm sorry to wake you, but it's all over the news. Adrian's arrest, the charges against him and Vanessa. The stock is already taking a hit." I sat up, instantly alert. "How bad?" "Down 15% in pre-market trading. And it's likely to get worse when the markets open. The board is demanding an emergency meeting." I rubbed my eyes, my mind racing. "Okay, set it up for 10 a.m. And Callie?" Thanks for handling this. Of course, she said softly. How are you holding up? I sighed. As well as can be expected. I still need to tell the kids. If you need me to reschedule. No, I cut her off. The company needs to come first right now. I'll figure out the rest. After hanging up, I made my way to the kids' rooms. Emma and Jake were already awake, confusion clear on their faces. Daddy, Emma asked, her voice small. Where's Mommy? I sat down on her bed, pulling them both close. Kids, we need to talk. Something bad has happened. Over the next hour, I did my best to explain the situation in terms they could understand. That Mommy and Uncle Adrian had done something very wrong, and that they had to go away for a while. That our family would be different now, but that I loved them more than anything. There were tears, questions I couldn't fully answer, and moments when I thought my heart might break. But by the end, we had a plan. They would stay with my parents for a few days while I sorted things out at work. As I dropped them off, my mother pulled me aside. Lucas, are you sure you're okay to handle all this? I nodded, forcing a smile. I have to be, Mom. For them. For the company. I'll be fine. Back at the office, I found the atmosphere tense. Whispered conversations stopped as I walked by, eyes following me with a mix of sympathy and curiosity. Callie met me at the elevator, tablet in hand. The board is assembled in the main conference room. I've prepared a preliminary statement for the press, but I thought you'd want to review it first. I skimmed the document she handed me. This is good, Callie. Really good. Have you ever considered a career in crisis management? She smiled wryly. Let's get through this crisis first, shall we? As we entered the conference room, the buzz of conversation died down. I looked around at the faces of our board members, seeing a mix of anger, concern, and in some cases, barely concealed opportunism. I took a deep breath and began. Ladies and gentlemen, I know you all have questions. I'm here to answer them as best I can and to assure you that despite recent events, the future of this company remains strong. Over the next 2 hours, I laid out everything that had happened, answered their questions, and presented our plan moving forward. It wasn't easy. There were heated moments, accusations, and more than one call for my resignation. But in the end, I stood firm. I built this company from the ground up, I said, my voice steady. I was betrayed, yes, but I'm still here, and I intend to lead us through this storm and out the other side. Slowly, grudgingly, the board came around. By the end of the meeting, we had a solid plan in place. We would be transparent about what had happened, cooperate fully with the authorities, and implement new checks and balances to prevent any future misconduct. As the board members filed out, Callie approached me. That was impressive, she said. How are you really doing? I slumped into a chair, suddenly exhausted. Honestly, I'm hanging on by a thread, but I can't let them see that. I can't let anyone see that. Callie sat down next to me, her voice gentle. You don't have to do this alone, Lucas. I'm here. We'll get through this together. I looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time. Callie, I don't know what I'd do without you. You've been a rock through all of this. She smiled, a hint of something more in her eyes. That's what partners are for, right? I nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude. Partners. I like the sound of that. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was Laura. Lucas, we need to talk. Can you meet me at the courthouse in an hour? I sighed, the weight of reality settling back on my shoulders. Duty calls, I told Callie. Can you handle things here? She stood up, straightening her blazer. Consider it done. Go. I've got this. As I left the office, I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Despite everything, I wasn't alone. I had Callie, Ethan, Laura. Maybe, just maybe, we'd make it through this storm. At the courthouse, Laura was waiting for me, a thick folder in her hands. We've got a problem, she said without preamble. What now? I asked, bracing myself for more bad news. She opened the folder, showing me a series of documents. Adrian's lawyers are trying to cut a deal. They're offering to testify against Vanessa in exchange for leniency. I felt a surge of anger. After everything he's done? No way. Laura nodded, her expression grim. I agree, but the DA is considering it. We need to make sure our case is airtight. We spent the next few hours going over every detail of the evidence, making sure there were no loopholes Adrian's lawyers could exploit. As we wrapped up, Laura put a hand on my arm. Lucas, are you sure you're ready for this? The trial is going to be brutal. I met her gaze, my resolve firm. I have to be. For my kids, for the company, for myself. I won't let them win. She nodded, a hint of admiration in her eyes. All right then, let's take them down. As I left the courthouse, I felt a mix of determination and exhaustion. The road ahead would be tough, but I was ready to face it head-on. Vanessa and Adrian had tried to destroy me, but they'd only made me stronger. And now, it was time for justice to be served. The courthouse loomed before me, its grand architecture a stark reminder of the gravity of what was about to unfold. I adjusted my tie, took a deep breath, and walked up the steps. Inside, the air was thick with tension. I spotted Ethan and Laura huddled with our lawyer, Rachel Hayes, a formidable attorney known for her razor-sharp mind and unrelenting pursuit of justice. Lucas, Rachel greeted me, her voice all business. Are you ready for this? I nodded, my jaw set. As ready as I'll ever be. Remember, she said, leaning in close, let me do the talking. No matter what they say, no matter how much it hurts, stay calm. I understand, I replied, my voice steady. Just then, a hush fell over the corridor. I turned to see Vanessa and Adrian being led in, both in handcuffs. Our eyes met for a brief moment. Vanessa looked away first, but not before I caught a glimpse of, was it regret? Adrian, on the other hand, met my gaze with defiance. I stared back, refusing to be intimidated. All rise, the bailiff called out as we filed into the courtroom. The trial was a blur of testimonies, evidence presentations, and legal arguments. Rachel was magnificent, systematically dismantling the defense's attempts to discredit our evidence. When it was my turn to take the stand, I felt a moment of panic. But then I caught sight of Callie in the gallery, her encouraging nod giving me strength. Mr. Carter, Rachel began, can you tell the court about the events leading up to your discovery of the plot against your life? I took a deep breath and began my story. As I spoke, I could feel the jury's eyes on me, hear the gasps as I recounted the betrayal. The defense attorney's cross-examination was brutal. He tried to paint me as a neglectful husband, an absent father, anything to justify Vanessa's actions. Mr. Carter, he sneered, isn't it true that you spent more time at the office than with your family? I felt my temper flare, but Rachel's warning echoed in my mind. Stay calm. I worked hard to provide for my family, I replied evenly, but I always made time for them. My children were and are my top priority. And yet, he pressed, your wife felt so neglected, she turned to Mr. Morgan for comfort? I could hear murmurs from the gallery. I looked directly at Vanessa as I answered. If my wife felt neglected, she could have talked to me. Instead, she chose to have an affair and plot my murder. The attorney had no response to that. As the trial progressed, the evidence against Vanessa and Adrian mounted. The recorded confession, the financial records showing embezzlement, the testimony from the undercover officer posing as a hitman. It was overwhelming. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the jury returned with their verdict. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendants, Vanessa Carter and Adrian Morgan, guilty. I closed my eyes, relief washing over me. On the charge of embezzlement, we find the defendants guilty. The courtroom erupted in chatter. I felt Ethan's hand on my shoulder, heard Laura's triumphant, yes. As Vanessa and Adrian were led away, Vanessa turned to me one last time. Lucas, she called out, her voice breaking. I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. Rachel handled them expertly, giving a brief statement while I slipped away. In the quiet of my car, I finally let the emotions of the day wash over me. It was over. We had one. But as I drove home to my children, I couldn't help but wonder, at what cost? The family court was a stark contrast to the grandeur of the criminal courthouse. Smaller, more intimate, but no less intimidating. I sat alone at one table, Vanessa and her lawyer at another. The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, peered down at us over her glasses. "Mr. Carter," she began, "I understand you're seeking a divorce on the grounds of adultery and criminal conduct. Is that correct?" I nodded, my voice steady. "Yes, Your Honor." She turned to Vanessa. "Mrs. Carter, do you contest these grounds?" Vanessa, looking pale and drawn, shook her head. "No, Your Honor." The judge nodded. "Very well. Let's proceed." My lawyer, a different one from the criminal trial, stood up. "Your Honor, given the circumstances of Mrs. Carter's conviction, we're seeking full custody of the children and a complete separation of assets." Vanessa's lawyer jumped in. "Your Honor, while my client acknowledges her mistakes, she still loves her children. We're asking for supervised visitation rights." The judge held up a hand. "I've reviewed the case files. Mr. Carter, please stand." I rose, my heart pounding. "Mr. Carter, can you assure this court that you can provide a stable home for your children?" I nodded, my voice firm. "Yes, Your Honor. My children are my world. I've arranged my work schedule to be home with them every evening. My parents are also available to help when needed." She turned to Vanessa. "Mrs. Carter, given your impending incarceration, how do you propose to maintain a relationship with your children?" Vanessa's voice was barely audible. I don't know, Your Honor. I just want to see them." The judge sighed. "This is a difficult situation. The children's well-being must come first." After what felt like hours of back and forth, the judge made her ruling. "In light of the evidence presented and Mrs. Carter's conviction, I'm granting Mr. Carter full custody of the children. Mrs. Carter will be allowed supervised visitation once a month, subject to the children's wishes and Mr. Carter's approval." I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. As for the division of assets, the judge continued, "Given Mrs. Carter's role in the embezzlement scheme, I'm awarding Mr. Carter all marital assets. Mrs. Carter will retain her personal belongings and any separate property she owned before the marriage." Vanessa let out a small sob, but didn't protest. "This court hereby grants the divorce. Mr. Carter, Mrs. Carter, I wish you both healing and peace." As we left the courtroom, Vanessa approached me. "Lucas," she said, her voice trembling, Can I say goodbye to the kids before I go to prison?" I looked at her, the woman I had once loved, now a stranger. Part of me wanted to refuse, to punish her further. But then I thought of Emma and Jake. "1 hour," I said finally. "Supervised. At my parents' house. It's the best I can do." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "Thank you." As I watched her walk away, I felt a chapter of my life closing. It was time to focus on the future, on rebuilding our lives. The new townhouse felt strange, yet comforting. Smaller than our old home, but cozier. More importantly, it was free from the ghosts of betrayal that had haunted our former residence. Emma and Jake were adapting surprisingly well. Kids are resilient. I reminded myself as I watched them play in the backyard. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. I opened it to find Rebecca Morgan standing there, looking nervous. "Rebecca," I said, surprised. "Please come in." She stepped inside, her eyes taking in the new surroundings. "I hope I'm not intruding. I needed to talk to someone who understands." I led her to the living room, gesturing for her to sit. "How are you holding up?" She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "It's been difficult. The divorce was finalized last week. I keep wondering how I could have been so blind." I nodded, understanding all too well. We see what we want to see sometimes. "Lucas," she said, leaning forward, "I wanted to thank you for sharing the evidence with me, for being honest when no one else was." "You deserve to know the truth," I replied simply. We talked for hours, sharing our experiences, our pain, our hopes for the future. There was something comforting about being with someone who truly understood what I'd been through. As the evening wore on, Rebecca stood to leave. "This has been nice," she said, a small smile on her face. "Maybe we could do it again sometime?" I found myself smiling back. "I'd like that." After she left, I sat in the quiet house, reflecting. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was life after betrayal. The familiar buzz of the office was comforting as I stepped off the elevator. Employees nodded respectfully as I passed, no longer with pity in their eyes, but with something akin to admiration. I found Callie in the conference room, surrounded by stacks of papers and multiple laptops. She looked up as I entered, a bright smile lighting up her face. "Lucas, perfect timing. I was just about to call you." I couldn't help but smile back. "What's the good news?" She gestured to one of the laptops. "Our stock price is up 20% since last quarter. The new security measures we implemented have restored investor confidence. And," she paused for dramatic effect, "we just landed the Johnson account." I let out a low whistle. We'd been courting the Johnson Company for years. "That's incredible, Callie. How did you manage that?" She shrugged, but I could see the pride in her eyes. "I may have called in a few favors, done a bit of smooth talking, but mostly, I think they were impressed with how we handled the crisis. Integrity goes a long way in this business." I nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, you know." Callie's cheeks flushed slightly. "We make a good team." "Speaking of which," I said, pulling out a folder from my briefcase, "I've been thinking about the future of the company, specifically about creating a new position, Executive Vice President." Callie's eyes widened. "Lucas, are you saying?" I handed her the folder. "The board has already approved it. The position is yours if you want it." She opened the folder, her hands shaking slightly as she read the offer. "This is—" "Lucas, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," I urged. "You've more than earned it." She looked up at me, her eyes shining. "Yes, absolutely yes." As we shook hands, sealing the deal, I felt a sense of rightness. This was how it should be. Two people who trusted each other implicitly, working together to build something great. "So, Executive Vice President Hayes," I said with a grin, "shall we go share the good news with the team?" Callie nodded, her smile radiant. "Let's do it." As we walked out of the conference room together, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The betrayal of Vanessa and Adrian had nearly destroyed everything I'd built. But from those ashes, something stronger had emerged. With Callie by my side, the support of friends like Ethan and Laura, and the love of my children, I was ready to face whatever the future held. The web of deceit had been untangled, and in its place, a new web of trust and hope was being woven. The road ahead would undoubtedly have its challenges, but for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to the journey. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.